Yep.
John, how you feeling?
Feeling better, thank you. Walking around a lot and trying to get things moving from mouth to the stomach area.
All set to go. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the Town of Rocky Hill Public Building Commission special meeting of April 30th at 5:34. Our only item that we have on our agenda today, and the reason for this special meeting, is to discuss and possible action for the recommendation of a general contractor for contract award for the Community Senior Center project. I guess with that, we'll let Matt take over and present the information that he wants to give us, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian. So as you guys probably all saw in what was distributed, got a good amount of bids back on this project, 17 bids, ranging from 9.99 million to 7.75 million. So decent spread as well. The low bid, 7.75, was the Pack Group. And I don't know if you have any questions on the information that had been provided, the bid tab, the subcontractor lists, or the unit pricing at all.
Yeah, I had one question in regards to the subcontractors that are listed.
Sure.
I see that Pack Group listed 3 subcontractors for each of the divisions that were listed. Is there any way that we can get them to narrow some of the names down? There's at least one that I really wouldn't like to see on this project.
You would like to, or would like not?
I would not like to see on this project.
There's one or two in here I agree with you on right now, without naming names. I think
We can certainly have that conversation. We did have approach that conversation during the scope review meeting with them. We had expressed potential concern about one as well. And they certainly wanted to hear of any other concerns or subcontractors that were named that were on the positive end of things as well. So I think we can certainly continue that dialogue offline, and I can touch base with Pack Group about those concerns.
But, you know, at the same time, we can only go so far because this is public bid. They can buy it out. And so we're just seeing who they, you know, we're looking at. That's basically what we're seeing. Public bid, so.
Pack Group may be a little more receptive if you allow them to provide an alternate. They're telling you 3 per trade because they still want some flexibility or leverage with the subs as they enter into their negotiations. So if they can present an alternate sub in lieu of somebody maybe the town has a concern with because of some specific prior history, that might be a viable approach.
the only thing that the minute you open up that door of it's a alternative, it's opening up the conversation of he thinks he might be getting more money. I think that we just want to make sure that they're using, and I agree with you, and I have no problem with them naming 3 separate subcontractors, because you're right. They need time, because on bid day, there's very little time to negotiate and go through proper scope for the GC. But, you know, we want this to be a successful project, and we have some concerns with a couple of them. And I think that should just simply be expressed, that who's the top 3 for, you know, the site, electrical, and steel. Mechanical, I 2 of them I know are very good. I don't know one of them. Same thing with the fire protection, plumbing. There's one guy, two of the guys in there I don't know. I don't know if anybody's had experience with any of them. But that's the reason we asked for subcontract lists for the primes, because those are the guys that are going to drive this job. It's not going to necessarily be the general contractor, except his management abilities. And that, that's why we hired Colliers to keep an eye on that and make sure they stay on track and share the information back to the architectural team to make sure information gets back to the GC with a little delay.
Yeah, and that's really why, that's why I'm not real concerned with the three. It's whatever they're going to be, as long as we can vet them out so that we're making sure that PAC is clear that any subs they choose are not going to be, they're all viable, they're all financially stable, especially now. There was one that we looked at with them and that we knew wasn't financially stable, or at least heard of. And so we pushed back on them on that one a little bit. Didn't become a problem, so that's not an issue. But again, you can only do so much with this. We'll, obviously we're oversight, so we'll be there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, putting our concerns out there to them, but I mean, yeah, it's a public bid. We can't tell them who they can and can't use. I think from a town standpoint, we are protected overall on the project. So, we can at least get our suggestions and thoughts and opinions out there. As long as they're, based on experience or what you know of the company and not anything personal. So. Now, Matt, did you see any issue? I didn't look at the unit prices. Anything stand out to you on that?
Yeah, there was, they were, I would say, generally speaking, across the board on unit prices, PAC Group was in the top third in most of them, but only the high point on the first one, and by quite a bit. It was a topic of conversation at the scope review meeting. The first one being unit price number 1 for cost per linear foot for fully installed fiber cable within the campus buildings. And most of the, excuse me, most of the other bids, unit prices came in somewhere in the $6-7 plus minus dollar per linear foot, and PAC Group came in at $104.39, which obviously is a big red flag. So I brought that up during the scope meeting, and their response was that they didn't know what the conditions were that they were going to be running this cable in. And essentially they based upon the most conservative in their perspective, which was hard ceilings everywhere that would need to be opened up, protected, and then enclosed again, which drove up their unit price. And they did say that if that's not the case, then they would reevaluate.
Yeah, I'm personally not a big fan of unit prices. I don't see them often come into play on projects because usually it's the scope that's not applicable to what you're dealing with. So I don't know if that's something that can be discussed when that arises. But maybe I don't know if it's negotiable or how we. I'd hate to bind us into a unit price that high, especially if we know there's going to be some work there.
Yeah, but normally we end up going in with unit prices, and it's a gauge for the general contractor, construction manager, just to see if we're in line. 99.9% of my change orders end up going either on T&M or a simple breakout firm bid. So everybody's very clear on what the cost is for labor, material, and equipment, et cetera. And then the fixed number that we all know is the percentage of markup that's allowed. So I don't think we need to be locked into any unit pricing. I think it's just a guide for when we're evaluating the whole job or the situation, because, a square foot of a block wall might be $20 a square foot. And then all of a sudden you get a price that works out to $45 a square foot. But once you start digging into the depths of it, there's toothing involved, there's demo, there's temporary shoring, et cetera. So yeah, all of a sudden the price gets jacked way up. So I understand where PAC is coming from on that comment. But I'm with you, Brian. There should be we should not be locked into any unit price that everything goes up or down by that. I think it's got to be based on a per
Yeah.
base.
If we have a real concern with a unit price like that, we could really do one or two things. We could renegotiate the unit price prior to signing the contract, which is viable. It's not really affecting the base bid amount, or we can eliminate it from the contract. The reality is I would rather negotiate a fixed price with them based on a scope of work that we understand than use the unit price. Unit prices work for 10 linear feet. But if we have a scope of work that's 2,000 linear feet, I find that the unit prices are way out of whack. So I would just maybe color it from the contract. Don't include that as a part of the contract and include all the other unit prices if you want.
Well, that's basically.
And the other thing I'll add to that is that we did include an allowance within the base bid project for this scope of work based upon estimated linear feet within each of the campus buildings and a number from the engineer per dollar per linear foot. So there's a $5,000 allowance within the base bid to cover the initial portion, or at least the estimated linear length of this scope of work. So this unit pricing was attempting to try and get unit costs for any of the additional should the path to from entrance to the building to the IT room was a little bit more circuitous than we anticipated. Can certainly scratch this from the contract and work on it on a time and material basis at the time once the conditions are met.
Yeah, no, and the price may also depend on what electrician he uses as well. So, Tom, you have any thoughts from the electrical end?
Well, obviously.
Tom Bodwin.
Oh,
yeah, can you hear
thank
me?
you.
Yeah, his number is obviously way out of whack comparatively. But I think, worst case scenario is if we look at it and we think that we're looking at we can take, I think, Tom Arcari's recommendation, of negotiating it outright. And after that, if we still feel, personally, I say, take a mean of the numbers here, even if you want to give them, blend the numbers and come up with an average cost and say, this is what the average is, and hopefully we can go there. Or two, wait until we get there. If we don't like the number, we can say we're not going to do the work, and we can ask the contractor to go out and get an alternate price for it. Obviously, there's some disparity here between the contractors that he carried versus everybody else.
Well, you know what? What's interesting is that when we looked at it, if you look at Wilson Construction, they had very similar unit pricing. So it's funny that they may have been looking at the same thing with the same subs or something, because their unit pricing is very, very similar. It's not exact, but it's dollars off almost on every one of them. And they were, except that one. That one was the only one that wasn't even close. So they were looking at it with the same subs except for the electrical. So the electrical seems to be an outlier. But I think that they just added in all the other trades that would be required to deal with ceilings and walls and penetrations and everything else outside of the electrical.
Okay. So as far as so do we need to make a decision on that, or do we think that we can leave that up to Colliers to determine?
We can do it. We can negotiate it. It's just a matter of, do you want us to negotiate it or drop it out?
I'd probably say drop it out. I think it's an unbalanced number, so I think we have the right as the owner to not accept it. So Anybody else have any issues with that?
No,
I don't.
Okay. Now, so, Matt, we'll get back to you here, but I just wanted to make a point here about the alternates. The alternates as listed within the bid documents did not line up, just so that we take it into consideration while we look at these numbers, that the alternates did not line up with the alternates, the order that was presented to us by the design committee as far as what their preferences were. So I just want to remind people that coming out of the design committee, alternate number 1 for the addition and the additional space was their highest priority. The second priority for them was our alternate number 3, which is the skyfold partition. Their next highest priority was alternate 5. That's the generator, relocating the generator. Alternate number 6, which is the creating the town green, removing the parking lot and creating the town green, was their next priority, followed by the parking lot on the north end of the north side of the library, which is alternate number 4. And then their last priority, obviously, is the police impound lot, which is alternate number 2. So I just wanted to point that out to you for consideration. So Matt, is there anything else from the standpoint of your scope review? Any other concerns that you have?
The only other thing I'll bring up is we did have a discussion with them about markup percentages, and we have recommended a 15% combined markup percentage, sub and GC. They came back this morning suggesting a 20%, to which I pushed back, and they had essentially said that recently they had been doing seen percentages between 18 and 26%, and we said that 15 is what the building committee would be looking for, and that they may be okay with 18%, but not with 20%. That was first thing this morning, and I have not gotten a response back yet. But I just wanted to report on that as well.
Can we
So
fix that just a little bit? Matt, the 15% is that being that you're allowing the subcontractor 10 and the GC of 5 over the sub?
It would be up to them, but it would be, we would define it as a combined 15%.
Yeah.
However they want to do it.
That's standard. I don't know where the 18 and 26% is coming from. I've not seen anything past 15 in years. So no, me personally, the vote is 15, take it or leave it.
I only see 10 and 10 on small federal projects. Generally, most of my other projects are 10 and 5, 15%. I think that's fair, and it's a strong line, and it's good to establish that now. So I say we hold strong to that, and take it or leave it.
And what, did we have anything established in our general conditions at all? I know we pulled that portion out of the bid form, but what did we have in our general conditions for that?
Standard AAA doesn't have it in there. We typically do it on some modified versions that we have in-house, but that's not the one the attorney wanted to have in there, so that one didn't get put in. So it's standard language, which is in normal AIA, which is why we edit it, because we don't like their standard language. But when we reviewed with the attorney, it didn't make it, so it's not in there. Just the standard language, which is vague in terms of the number. It doesn't have a number in there, actually.
If you're going to be pushing back on that issue too, on the 15%, make sure you're clear on small tools in making sure that there's a limit that, anything that costs less than, for example, $500, and I've seen them now creeping those small tools up, cannot be a separate line item. It's part of their hourly rate.
Yeah, I think we usually use $250 actually, but it's not in there. But we'll just use that as the negotiating tool.
Yeah, but I know the state projects, the last 2 I bid, it got pushed from 500 up to $1,000. Is that on yours too, Steve?
No, there's no number established.
Then the CMs are doing it on their own, because that's been the last two in general conditions under the CM side. So I think 500 is a fair number to say anything 500 or less, you can't charge in addition to. I
Okay.
just don't want to see this job turned into a nickel and diming situation. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, if this was a much smaller project, possibly, but I think that we need to establish that 15% upfront, and yeah, I think we need to hold strong on that.
Will do.
Okay.
So,
So,
any other?
Matt,
Go ahead.
you guys have any? So, what's your guys' recommendation after going through stuff and looking at our overall budget? I know our referendum is 10.5. That is not our construction. I believe our construction budget was around 8.2.
Yeah, 8,243,600. Let me see if I can share my screen. I put together a little bit of PDF or spreadsheet that I think everybody would appreciate. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep,
All right.
got it.
Great. So just as a summary, as Brian was just saying, we have a construction budget of 8.243 million. The current project contingency is 445,200, which is 5.4% of that. As kind of a synopsis or summary of the bid, the base bid came in at 7,754, which leaves just shy of a $490,000 delta to the budget. The values for the alternates are here in the center. I made a couple notes just in this to reference. So arts and crafts would be best, obviously, to accept immediately. We've acknowledged that or been told that the police department impound lot, at the time, there's no additional funding. The acoustic walls are quite a high value compared to what we would have anticipated and estimated. So it's tough to recommend that one. The parking lot, the new parking lot, could certainly be accepted later. One thing to note is that lot does require a variance should we decide to go forward with that. The generator relocation, if desired, ideally would be taken on the earlier side, just mostly for infrastructure purposes and sequence, but could certainly be done at any point. And then the last one, the town green, could really be accepted at any point. Right now, we've got a 90-day hold period, but if there were any in here that the committee saw could be potentially appealing further down the road, that's certainly a topic that I could broach with PAC to be able to hold any of that pricing longer. And we could do that ahead of contract signing.
Matt, just to double check something,
Sure.
if you can go to the top for a minute, to the budget and the contingency, is that 445.2 inclusive in the 82436, or is that in addition to?
This is the current project contingency, so the owner's construction contingency.
I understand what I'm saying.
It's not within this.
It's in addition to.
It's
In addition to, sorry.
And that number's reduced if we go with Brian's recommendations down to like 4%, right? If we take.
Yeah, so here's the two. Can you guys see this? I'm gonna blow up a little bit more.
Yes.
So here's kind of two scenarios. The first one is if only the base bid is accepted. Obviously, the construction cost is 7.754, which means that contingency increases by that roughly 490,000. So we end up with 934,000 and change. which gets us to about 12%. The other alternative, I think that we would also recommend in this case would be base bid as well as the alternate number 1, which would bring the total construction cost to 8,327. And the impact to contingency there would mean that we would have a reduced contingency down to $361,000, which is roughly 4.3% of that 8.327. So that's kind of the breakout of those two different scenarios. At the bottom here, at the beginning of the project, we targeted a 6.5% contingency number, which was that 536.7. That was
Matt, if I may, what on recent GC projects that you guys have overseen, what are the kind of the percentages that you end up seeing at the end of the job? I mean, I know it obviously depends on about 100 different variables. But
Yeah,
in
there's so many
general.
variables. It's all over the place. I mean, it depends on if the project had good drawings. If there's a lot of E&Os on there, then, that goes up. If there's a lot of unforeseens, then it just comes out of there. There's all kinds of different scenarios. We've had some projects where they hit ledge where they didn't think they were going to hit it because they did 30 borings. And of course the ledge was right where in between boring, 10 and 12. So that just happened. So it's tough to gauge it, but we always base our contingency on 5%, between 5 and 7%, depending on what the project has for renovation and where we think the drawings are going to be. And other factors, if there's a lot of site work that, we don't know about, things like that. So, we were basing this one on 6.5. We're down to 4. If we take alternate 1, I think we'll be, it's not a complicated project. You should be okay. But the only thing that I have to caution now, and we just have to throw it out there, it's for you to decide, but we get documentation every day. As early as like 3 hours ago, I got something else that just keeps reinforcing some things that are happening out there with this COVID issue that is causing, some financial impact to projects that we just don't know. We didn't know 2 months ago or 3 months ago what was going to happen, and look what happened. 3 months from now, I don't know what is going to happen. So, we have to be wary of that. And we've had some projects where we've had $50,000, $60,000 change orders for, things that, you could say are legitimate because they have to get new PPE and you're not working as efficient when you're 6 feet apart and you have to clean things a lot more often and bring in crews more than you would have already done. So there's a cost to it that, is going to come out of this contingency.
Well, let's back up and talk about the COVID, for example. This is going to fall under one of those jobs that it continues. As I know on 5 of my projects I'm on right now. Now, the hard cost, like a cleaning station, is a real dollar value. If it requires a cleaning company to come in and spray everything down on a nightly basis, that's a real hard cost. People are now required and have been for some time, and I know because my crew has to work very close together because of what we do for a living, and their masks are on, their gloves are on. And they've released us from a lot of other liabilities as far as fit tests and OSHA requirements. They're easing up on that a bit to give us some room. So, some of this needs to be scrutinized very closely if somebody starts throwing out COVID-19 and the cost is $50,000 or something in that nature. Because I'm just not seeing it, because we're in a situation where we're not charging extra money. I can't justify it. And I was just in a meeting just the other day where it was talked about, and they said, anyone in this meeting is asking for more money, speak now or forever hold your peace. Nobody said a word because nobody could justify it. The only one who can would be the CM or the GC because of those few hard fixed costs that we talked about. So I don't want to blow that out of proportion either. So, if we can keep an eye on that, please.
No, it is being kept an eye on. Yeah, I mean, it will be certainly, but I'm just telling you what we've seen in the past, and I can tell you the 50,000 that we looked at was all legitimate stuff, not stuff that was pushed up back on. So, it was a big project. That project was a $70 million project, so it's a lot different scale.
And you're going
But
to ease up too, Kurt, on this because, they're going to start relieving some of that pressure to some degree. And the site guys are going to be sitting in machines. They're not anywhere near each other. Your concrete digging and foundation and so on. Your early trades, as we're getting just started, as they're easing up this COVID-19, you're going to see that transition, that it's the cost, if any, is going to be significantly lower than it is a month ago, significantly, or it should be.
That's the theory. I've just, again, that's why I'm letting you guys decide on it. I'm just pointing out that it's a lot of unknowns, that, this thing's moving every day. And, the executive orders that come out have a cost to them. That's all.
We have 3 different projects going of 3 different sizes that are addressing COVID issues. We have a $30 million community center project, which has a big construction manager on it, and their COVID management costs are fairly high. We have a medium or a lower $5 million GC project where we're seeing very little COVID impact. And we have a small GC project where the GC has shorted the project, and they're generally using COVID as an excuse for everything under the sun, and we're regularly fighting that off. So we're seeing the whole spectrum of it. It's real that it could be a viability, but and take this all with a grain of salt. I tend to be more of a gambler than the play it safe kind of guy. I would prefer to have a 5% contingency. We're seeing most of our projects change orders, in the range of, as Kurt said, 3 to 7%, depending on the project. In this particular project, most of the project is a new building added on to an existing building. So once we get out of the ground, most of what we're constructing, except for the tie-ins, is new. I think that works in our favor. But there is some renovation work in the building, which could, cause us to dive into conditions we're not aware of. If we could be at 5%, I think that would be great. But in the case of alternate number 1, you're never going to do that again. The other stuff you can add on. Alternate number 1, it's kind of like now or never. So I think that's the thing you kind of have to focus on when you're debating the decision. I know John's going to go back 4 months from now and beg the town for another 100,000. He'll make it happen. He's a champ, and he'll get that police department stuff paid for somewhere else.
Can I pile onto this a little bit, if you don't mind?
Sure.
And Tom, you're going to probably hate me for this, but one of the things that we have to seriously consider, if you need to creep up in your contingency, because you're not too far off at that 4.33. And I'm in agreement that 5% is a good benchmark to hold if you can. I'm also in agreement that the alternate 1 is such a high priority, and you could use that space, and you'll get more use of it down the road. One of the things that might help increase that contingency is we might have to take a hard look at some VE items. And we all have to be very open-minded to that. So it's things that, can be considered. We have to think about that.
Well, I like to believe we're fairly open, so we're on board with having that conversation.
So
One
can
last
I speak to
issue.
that can I speak to that for a minute, Tom?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
If I can, and since Sal brought it up, I'll address it. On the lighting package alone, I believe there were no substitutions allowed.
right now, that's correct, I think.
All right, well,
Because we've had such a bad track record with the whole lighting process. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
so to that end, depending on the number that these guys carried, my guess is that you know, I asked for a couple of lighting numbers from a couple of the vendors, and you know, one of the vendors that I got the number from was right around, actually, I believe it was $280,000 for the lighting package for this project. Now let's just take, if you end up getting an inside number, maybe you get that down to 220, but it might be worth looking at in order to, one, VE some of the lighting that's there. One, in order to creep it up and get you back to your 5%, and then or two, possibly depending on how much you want to VE it and you're open to. I didn't really take a good look at it, nor did I ask the vendors to take a look at it to see what they could do, but potentially be able to pick up one of the other additional alternates that are here. Just food for thought. I'm just putting it out there.
I'm open to VE and the electrical lighting package. We do it on pretty much every project. The reason on this project we said no substitutes is because historically we find we literally get back like 15 cents on the dollar. It's like the mafia. I don't know what it is with the electricians and electrical lighting companies, but it's awful in negotiating that particular package.
Somebody's got to pay for all those trips those electricians get taken.
I know, right?
Well,
But no, we would be open to that because it doesn't affect program space or size. In the big picture, it doesn't affect the operation of the facility. If we can get some dollars back, we would look at that.
You laugh. Right now, I'm supposed to be in the Bahamas, but it got canceled because of this COVID thing.
It got canceled because you weren't able to VE any lighting packages.
Oh, believe me, I have, and I actually have saved my customers a good chunk of change on a couple of projects. But be that as it may, I don't want to speak for another contractor and what they may do and what they may offer up.
Well, that's something I think we'd be willing to look at.
Yeah, and there's got to be a few other things that we need to have a real, and we don't necessarily have to address the specific items tonight, but we have to dig into those a little bit and have a discussion about it, because you need to fill that coffer a little bit. At least in the beginning, you'll get a pretty good feel within the first 3-4 months where this job is headed, as far as change order heaven or not.
Matt, we're not looking at the soft cost budget. Are there any line items in the soft cost budget where we can realize?
No,
20%?
nothing. No,
Oh, that was quick. You didn't even show it to us.
you don't have to see it.
Uh-huh.
We don't have anything.
All right.
We are extremely tight. We threw everything into construction we could to make sure that we could build this project. So we're tight as tight gets on the soft costs. I can tell you that right now. So there's nothing to give. That would be a mistake.
One thing I will bring up that came out of the scope review meeting was there was a recognition as we were going through confirming the various alternates that alternate number 2, the police impound lot, the documents were not updated to the intended scope. And so there's a portion of some of the intended scope that should have been an alternate number 2 included in the base bid. And so what I did was took the PAC group alternate number 2, police impound lot value, which is $144,000. And I went back to our CD estimate alternate, which did recognize all of the scope that was intended for alternate number 2. And that reconciled value was $243,500. So I just felt it worthwhile to bring up that, you know, if you use those values, at least there's some potential savings there to be realized if that portion of the scope was pulled out of the base bid. and that, potential value just based upon those numbers is about $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, I see we have a range of 71,000 to 225,000 for that parking lot alternate. So,
Yeah, but that's assuming you can get PAC to agree to that.
Well, it's gonna be something that we talked to them about in the scope review already, and they will need to take some of it out. If you don't take that alternate, then, and they put some of that alternate in the base bid, we got to take it out anyway. So there's going to be a credit coming no matter what, I guess is Matt's point.
Yeah.
By the way, not that this is a dollar item, but during the scope review, I thought you were supposed to discuss with them, Matt, and hopefully you did. Maybe it just didn't make it to your notes. Those two door, the precast panels above the two doors on Old Main Street. Those won't make it through any kind of restoration that I could see. They're in pretty tough shape.
That did not make it into the conversation. No, my apologies. But I can follow up with them on that.
That value, because I priced this project out, the value of that should be in the neighborhood of, bear with me, so I'll pull up here. Should be somewhere between $9,000 and $11,000. That doesn't include the shoring. That's masonry, precast, and installation. So there might be a little bit of selective demo, a little bit of shoring for the brick above it. But that's an easy shoring job, because a lot of that's going to be covered up if, assuming that stays on or stays in, correct? I think that side gets covered as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
okay, that's something I would just have to keep in mind. But yeah, I don't know, if Matt, if there's a way to establish how they looked at those panels and what they think that value is in case we need to come back to that. Because I know we will end up having to come back to it. So that could just be an issue. So
And
overall,
Matt,
so Matt, go ahead, Steve.
what, just on the, you did discuss the schedule with PAC, they had no issue with it, and if we did take alternate one, would that affect the schedule as in longer time since we're adding square footage, so to speak? Was that discussed?
We did discuss schedule. They took no issue with the schedule. And when reviewing the all of the alternates, they did not identify any calendar impacts on any of the alternates.
Okay. Anything else, Steve?
No, that's it.
Okay. So Matt, overall, Matt and Kurt, overall, so what is your recommendation from your end?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's you guys' decision, but, it looks like from the numbers that it's doable to take alternate one. It feels like if you didn't, I think the strategy, I'll say this, the team did a really good job of, putting together alternates that made sense and taking out that arts and crafts, just, you can see it now, made sense in terms of the numbers. The budget was set fairly good. I mean, if you took the average of all the bids, the average of every bid was about 8.5 million and our budget was 8.24. So we were, I mean, what's that? On percentage basis, it's very low for a difference. We're basically right there. That's where you want to be in your budget, is right in the middle of the pack. And we were there. So that's good. So it showed that the strategy worked, the team worked well on that. And it looks like if you didn't take that alternate one, like Tom said, you missed the boat on something you can't really do later, unless it's an addition, which is going to cost more. And if you didn't do it at all, again, you're going to have a really good excess of project contingency. I mean, you're going to have 12% in contingency that, yes, you could. I think the only thing you would do there, if that's the case, is there's not too many betterments that you would do other than that. and you would end up, just not bonding for that money and give it back to the town is really what you do. So either way, I think alternate one is the best use of the money for the town.
Yeah, I mean, I could guarantee that it would never happen down the road anyways. So it took 20, 30 years for this to happen. So just a couple of general things here, I guess. So relating to the generator alternate, we're not moving the generator now, looks like, but do we need to put in some kind of provisions for potential future move? Maybe that's something for us to talk about once we get underway, of what that cost would be to put some kind of provisions in for future moving of the elevator, of the generator. But just something to consider, not
Well,
now, but.
what we've done in the past is you can keep the switchgear. You definitely make room for a switchgear in the electrical closet, and or the switch rather, the switch you got to put in for it. So either make room for it or install it now and just not wire to it and put the conduit into a location and then let it be ready for it, so that the bulk of the cost, which is the generator and the install of it, can happen later. We've done that in the past.
Okay. Yeah, and then overall, I mean, I would love to have a 5% contingency at least, but I think we can work with the number that we have now with the alternate one accepted. We as a town have been spoiled, and we've been on both sides of the spectrum in recent projects for as far as change orders between the high school being the high school job, and then we got absolutely spoiled by the Moser School project. So we're a little hesitant when it comes to change orders because of that. But I think from my standpoint, I'm for base bid plus the alternate one for a recommendation. So I don't know if you guys want to go around and offer up any opinions before we go ahead and put this to a vote.
But Brian, why don't we handle that under discussion? So why don't I put the motion on the floor to move forward with the base bid plus alternate one as submitted by PAC Group.
Okay, I have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Sal. Okay, any discussion at this point? Any discussion, thoughts, opinions regarding this motion that's made? Any discussion? Last time discussion?
Is that committee discussion only?
No, I guess you can put your 2 cents in.
I just think it would be worthwhile that while we have an opportunity to discuss this with the PAC group before the contract is signed, potentially we should get some proposals for a substitution for the lighting package, and then also add to the motion eliminating the unit cost, and maybe getting a pricing to eliminate some of the concrete panel work. If we can create some value engineering before they're under contract, we still have a little bit of leverage with them. Once we're under contract, some of our leverage goes away. Can the committee authorize the working team headed up by Colliers to enter into some potential VE options or negotiations prior to executing the contract?
I think for tonight, it's a recommendation by PBC on which contractor to go to, and I think Tom's resolution addresses that.
Okay.
And it's just more that, are we comfortable working with this, is it PAR or PAC group, and move forward? But once, to keep the project moving along, the items that I assume Tom is bringing up would relate to the negotiations to come up with a final contract with PAR Group. I think we're taking it out of 17 potentials and moving it into one. And we are recommending that to go forward with the arts and crafts room. I'd like to leave it maybe at that, and then you have another meeting coming up in a couple weeks to start addressing these other items. And then I just referred to Matt is we're trying to keep this thing moving along. So I think once we identified a contractor, then we can start, I believe, planning the, putting up the fences and all of that and so on. So I don't think we need to come to the penny tonight, but at least we're identifying the contractor, the base bid, and the alternate that we believe we can afford with a sufficient contingency.
Any further discussion?
Don't forget, we need to include that 15% markup discussion as well.
Okay. So I have
Call
a
the question.
motion. I have a motion and a second to recommend contract award to PAC Group for the base bid and alternate. I'm going to call it to question. I'm going to do a roll call. You can give me a yay or nay, please. Tom Bodwin,
Yay.
Sal Gansey,
Yay.
Todd Marchand,
Yay.
Steve Longo,
Yay.
and David O'Connor.
Yay.
Okay, and I don't believe Mr. Bates has joined us. Okay, so it's a 5 yay and 0 nay. So that's a motion is approved. Any abstentions? No, that's right. Everyone's roll call. We're good.
We don't have 6 votes?
Well, 5. I mean, I'm really just a deciding tiebreaker, right?
Okay,
I'm a yay.
you broke the tie, Brian.
All right, yeah, okay. All right, so we have a vote yes to move forward and put this on the table for our town council to look at their upcoming meeting. I don't believe we have any other business at this time. And I appreciate everyone taking time out of their schedule for this special meeting to review this and approve this project to go forward with the base bid and the alternate, which is exciting, and look forward to getting this thing underway. So at this point, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, this special meeting is adjourned at 6:26. Have a good
All
night.
right. See you guys.
Take care.
Thanks.
Matt, can you send that spreadsheet?
I'm sorry?